Welcome to Discover Resilience, the podcast, a series dedicated to deepening conversations around a critical shift, how organizations are breaking down silos to achieve true enterprise-wide resilience.
Join us as we sit down with customers, industry leaders, and Everbridge experts, exploring everything from the philosophical to the strategic and the tactical steps of what it truly means to build and maintain resilience. I'm Casey Daghai.
And I'm Shay Bond. We're your hosts, and with a combined 30 years of experience in the resilience space, we've seen firsthand what works
and what doesn't
when it comes to resilience, and we're excited to bring those conversations to you. I don't know about you, but I spend the first, let's call it 4 months of the year, getting rid of basically everything that's in my house. All of it.
You just throw it all away?
Most of it goes in the trash can. Some of it goes in the donate pile.
Yeah.
But starting like just after after Christmas happens, I put away my Christmas tree, and my eyes change, they glaze over, and I become
I'm
in a trance, and it's like, get rid of everything. Everything has to. The walls start closing in around me, and I must purge everything, and it remains for like several months.
I do feel the same way after Christmas. I think anyone with children probably feel the same way.
Is that what it is? Is it like the trigger point of just like all of their stuff?
I do love Christmas, but there's a really special moment of, kind of awfulness. I feel like that comes after Christmas, where you're looking around your family room and you're like, I don't recognize any of this.
Do we need forks? I don't think so. Throw them away.
Get rid of them.
Yeah. Why do we have 14 hand towels? Get rid of them.
Yes, this is something that I do, to answer your question very directly. This is actually one of my hobbies, is purging things out of my house. It is one of the greatest satisfactions of my life, is to go through my home and get rid of things, which could be throwing things out. It's usually, as much as I can, donating things. And so much so that I don't even know how I came across this term, but there is a term called obsessive Spartanism, also known as obsessive decluttering. And it is, someone that likes to obsessively get rid of things in their home to the point where you're probably getting rid of things that you actually need, which has happened to me multiple times.
Do you end up having to then rebuy those things at some point?
Yes.
Nice.
So I got rid of a space heater because I was like, why would I need a space heater? I needed a space heater. I had to buy a new one. So it's called obsessive Spartanism, and I love it.
I don't think I'm taking it to that level, maybe. Well,
you don't feel like, that's my thing. Like, I feel like I could conquer the world after I've gone through a room and just tore it apart.
Well, I definitely do feel that way. I just don't know that I get rid of things that I will probably end up having to repurchase. But yeah, no, I'm like, I want to get rid of everything.
Yeah.
I'm on a tear.
Yeah.
I'm scaring my family.
I'm terrifying my family.
Like, they're hiding their cherished belongings, or else it will end up in a bag that's going to...
I have to do it when no one's around, if I'm being completely honest. Again, I'm curious, like, people with kids, if you do this. But it's like the tchotchke. Like, they go to the kids' birthday parties and they bring home some little rubber ball that they forget about. When they are not around, I go through their stuff. See you later.
Yeah.
We don't need another little plastic dinosaur. You've got 1,000 of those.
Yeah. See, my daughter's figured me out, though, because I'll do that too. But then I'll put it in a bag and so she'll come home and she's started rooting through things, and she'll be like, "This was my plastic dinosaur that I need."
Special thing to me in my entire life.
Like, okay,
you basically got rid of my cat.
You got that at a birthday party.
Actually, now that I think about this, at the time of us having this conversation, I did do this. Like, I went through the playroom, the kids' rooms, whatever. And as we were traveling here, Jim and I did drive down together. And what I didn't realize before Jim walked into my home is that in the playroom, which he probably noticed, but didn't want to say anything because he was like, that's really embarrassing. There were 8 trash bags just sitting in the playroom ready to be donated.
Wow.
And there was a moment.
Didn't say anything?
No, what a guy.
Wow.
He got to witness my obsessive Spartanism and one of the greatest joys in my life, which is getting rid of stuff. If anybody needs us to go, I have offered this to people. There was a coworker of ours, I won't out them, but this coworker was like, our family, we really want to organize and get rid of things. There's so much stuff. And I was like, I will come to your house for free, just whenever you want me to, and get rid of stuff. I was like, but I want your family to watch me as I do.
Sick. He is sick.
I want your family to line up as I get rid of all this stuff that is not important to them. He did not take me up on that offer.
No kidding. Yeah, he was probably like, she's insane.
Somebody will. Let me know. I'm for hire.
Golly, let's get into the episode. Our guest today has spent more than 20 years helping communities prepare for and respond to emergencies across Southern California and beyond. Soraya Sutherlin is a certified emergency manager and the founder and CEO of Emergency Management Safety Partners. She's led crisis communications for the U.S. Secret Service, coordinated disaster response across Los Angeles County, and supported major events from the Super Bowl to COVID-19. A powerful part of Soraya's work is how she brings preparedness into everyday life. She is even the author of a kid's book about safety, aimed to help kids and families understand safety and resilience early on. Today, she joins us to talk about what real resilience looks like and how you build it before a crisis and why starting those conversations early truly matters. Soraya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And so we like to get started just with a little bit of a fun segment here. This one is our rapid fire resilience. I'm sure you've seen this format before, but we give you kind of two options and then you choose one or the other, just for folks to learn a little bit more about you. So the very first one, which arguably is always the most important question to Shay and I, is coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Great answer. Yes, love that. Paper or digital notes?
Paper, 100%.
I will do notes digitally and then go back and kind of rewrite them. I have to put my cursive skills to the test. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Okay, I'm with you there. Cruise or road trip?
Ooh. I've never been on a cruise, but from what I know about how I am with control, I think I'd really freak out on a cruise. So I feel like a road trip would be more my jam.
That's my stance as well, but I've never been on a cruise. I am a control freak, but I know so many people that have been on cruises and they're like, "No, it's great. It's actually a fantastic time." So
it's like a floating hotel. Yeah.
I don't know. Text message or audio message?
Text. I have no time for the audio stuff. I got to read it.
Really? Oh my gosh.
If
Okay.
you send me an audio message, it will literally just go unread forever. I'm like,
so funny.
Send this and text it.
That is really
You
funny.
and I may be the only people out here using audio messages.
We might be. Yeah.
I don't know.
If anybody's out there, please let us know. We'll send you an audio message.
We'll form a club.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Great. Pizza or tacos?
Tacos.
Yeah, I feel like that's a proper California response for sure. Last one, beach or mountains?
Beach. I live at the beach, so
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate both.
Yes, most definitely. A little bit of both never hurts. So thank you for playing our rapid fire resilience. What I thought we would do today is really set the stage for the conversation we're going to have, which is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We interview other industry professionals like yourselves, or we interview folks from Everbridge to really talk about resilience, from kind of a corporate or a company perspective. But what we really want to talk about today is how we best prepare, the future generation and our children. And so, as adults, we are obviously all faced with different types of threats and risks, whether it's natural disaster or human-made disaster. But, as a grown-up, we feel, or maybe we falsely feel like we know what to do in these situations, right? Like we have our of ample sound, mind, body, all of those things. And what we have, though, is this group of this demographic of people that inherently need more guidance, and those are our children. And as parents, it is so natural for us to want to protect and to shield and to not talk about the really important things or the things that might be hard for children to really understand fully. Um, and so, Soraya, one of your missions that you've set out to do with your background is really to help equip children and youth with the language and the skills and the tools in order to understand what to do in an emergency situation, or how to process those feelings and understand things that can be super scary for them. And you have obviously an extensive background as an emergency manager, and so what I'd love for us to just first talk about is your experience as an emergency manager. If you want to give a little bit of backgrounds about how you got started, but then also, was there a moment or a point in your career where you really saw things from a real world perspective where you said, oh my gosh, like these kids don't have the skills that they really need to be prepared and to protect themselves? Like, was there a kind of specific moment there, if you give a little bit of background?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a child, I was terrified of earthquakes. And living in California, it's all we have, right? And it just seemed, I grew up in the era of Northridge, so experiencing all of that and just knowing, I remember running to doorways. That was what they told us to do back in the 90s. That was what you knew. And I just remember feeling so out of control in this environment, and I was terrified beyond comprehension. And so that if as I like think back to how did I get into this and what was so interesting, I was so interested in the dynamics of natural disasters. I remember for a sixth grade project, I tried to recreate a tsunami like a plastic Tupperware tub for a science project. And I remember I was so interested in learning how and the why, because I felt like if I understood that, then I could prepare better. Like I could know mentally going into it, this is what I need to be afraid of, or I don't need to be afraid of it. Well, fast forward to real like growing up, I actually majored in musical theater, so not in any capacity in what I'm doing now. But it was interesting because as I started hearing more about different scenarios, different things, I just was drawn to I really needed to shift my focus towards how do we better prepare communities. And I was seeing the disasters and the destruction. And the one thing everyone continually would say was, I never thought it would happen to me. And we weren't prepared. And so that's kind of how I began my work in emergency management and really tried to understand the dynamics of communities. And I think that's really important when we talk about how we prepare in different areas, because every community is different and what works for one area and one segment is not going to be the same for the other. So it's really that listening component of what are your needs and how do we focus on them. My biggest shift in really focusing on how we prepare kids was having kids of my own. Getting through college, I was a nanny. And so I remember, all of the conversations we would have came from a deficit standpoint. And it came from a reactive standpoint. Don't do this. Don't touch that. Don't go there. Don't say hi. Don't do this. And we aren't giving kids those tools of knowing, well, what do we do?
Mm.
And so it's coming from almost that negative deficit in what we do, right? We want to keep them safe and it comes from a great place, but really shifting towards, okay, well, how do we turn that into a positive so that they feel like they have more of a role in their own safety? And so having kids, and I was part of a co-op preschool, I guess, if you would call it. So we would work in the classrooms, and it was all about framing the way we talk to kids. And I really took that into my work and how we then talked about really scary stuff. For example, in preschools, you aren't naturally set up with desks and chairs and tables, right? It's a very play environment. So what do you do if there's an earthquake when you've got a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds running around and there's no tables, and where do you tell them to go? And so one thing that I thought was incredibly creative was they would scream, Jack in the Box. And so what that meant was kids all got down on their hands and knees and they covered their head and their neck with their hands, and they became real small on the ground. And that's actually what we teach adults to do. If you can't get under something, you want to protect your head and your neck, your vital organs, by protecting them by getting low, and you want to get low to the ground. And so I was like, that's such an interesting idea because now we're teaching kids. It's more of a fun, playful kind of environment. And we would do it randomly. It catches kids' attention. It's kind of catchy. They think it's fun. And then they would jump up at the end of it. But it all based on really looking towards the teacher to help facilitate that. And so I took that kind of concept with me in helping teach my own kids. And so I started very early having conversations with my own children. I live in a 2-story house. What happens? And this is a scenario. Unfortunately, I replayed over and over again. Fortunately, because of that, we were able, and I'll share this a little later, to get out of a house fire quickly. But what would they do? Do they know if I can't get to them? And this is the biggest fear I think most parents have. If I'm not with my child, do they know what to do to keep themselves safe? And that was the one thing I realized early on I needed to tell them, because if I was upstairs and there was a fire and I couldn't get downstairs, would my kids stay? We teach them, stay where you are, right? We say that. Well, do they know when it's dangerous enough to then we need to teach them to leave? So it kind of got that whole piece going on, having those own conversations. And then my friends would say, well, we have nannies with our kids and when we're working, and that's the reality, is we're not always with them. Can you put together like a 1-page list of like what we should be doing and what we should tell, babysitters and nannies? And it just became very relevant that kids and parents needed a resource to not be scared, because we avoid the stuff we don't know as parents, right? Oh, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to mess them up, and I don't know how to explain it appropriately, right? So that's really where the premise of like the work that I've been doing in writing the book is just really making sure I can give parents and children the resources to then pull from to have those conversations in a very safe, open environment.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know as a parent myself, and talking with a lot of other parents, to your point, and to your point, our inclination is to protect our kids. Our inclination is to shield them from the scary and the hard. And safety really does become a list of don'ts. And so it sounds like you have taken the approach of shifting that into a list of do's and a list of kind of empowered actions. And I know one of the things that you talk about a bit is how you prep kids, and how you prep them with imperative information that they need. What is in your opinion, kind of the appropriate age of getting them to have the right data, things like how to call 911 or what their address is, and when is the right time for that, and how do you get that information to stick?
You can start as early as 3. And you can do certain things like, especially 911. I would say that's probably the simplest thing to teach kids early on, how to get help. And I always say, look for the helpers, Mr. Rogers'
Mm-hmm.
concept, like there's helpers everywhere. So instead of saying, hey, there's bad people and we should be scared of the X, Y, or Z, it's let's look for the helpers. Who are the
Right.
helpers in our community? And having these conversations with them early on. A really easy trick that I did with my kids was I got paper plates and I taped them in the same segment of like how a telephone would be set up. And we wrote numbers on them, and then I put them on a wall and we practiced. We actually practiced dialing 911 so that if they ever saw a phone, they would see the same number formation and pattern and
Yep.
they would know 911. So easy things like that. The other thing that I really truly believe in, it's not always about teaching them what to do when something's wrong. It's teaching them about situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really getting them up and seeing and understanding. While kids may not at 3 or 4 be able to remember a phone number or address, they will remember things like, I live 2 stop signs away from a school.
Right.
My house is on the street with the red tree. Um, I live in a blue house. I remember my son was 3. We went to Hawaii and he was running around telling everyone that we had a blue house. I was like, that's great. But there's certain things that I think you can teach kids. The other thing that's really simple is the ABC game. And you just driving, walking around. Let's find everything that starts with the letter A. And then it gets kids to look and understand and see visualization, and it teaches them about their surroundings, which is the by far the most important thing you can ever do for your child, because they are not here, they're up here, and they
Mm-hmm.
learn to see the world around them, and they can explain and they can understand and process what is around them. And so, they say at about 5 to 7 is that primal age for safety decision making. So you can
Mm-hmm.
actually teach kids, they can explain to you when something's wrong. But as early as 3, you can start practicing how to dial 911.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really simple things you can do, and just make it fun, make it repetitive, make them all different colors, but make it in a way that if they ever saw a phone,
Mm.
it would be in the same pattern formation. They would
Right.
be able to then utilize it.
Yeah, that's such it's just such a thing that as you're explaining it, I'm like, "Oh, duh,
Yeah, right.
obviously that," but I would have
Exactly.
never thought
Right.
to do something like that, but I think it really speaks to, the work that you're doing and how you are thinking about really getting into, the mindset of a child and how they think, how they learn, how they operate, which is so different than us, right? Like we know what we have to prepare for and what the impacts might be, but they have no idea.
It reminds me of, and this is related, unrelated, but I did photography as a hobby for a period of time, and the number one thing that was kind of drilled into your brain when photographing kids was always get into the perspective of the kid, right? Get
Yeah.
on their level,
Sure,
and so
yeah.
that was kind of the first thing that came to mind as you're talking about that is like
Yeah.
get into the perspective of the kid.
Right.
Duh,
Absolutely.
like you said.
Yeah, but and all really great recommendations too. Now, obviously when it comes to those more tactical, ways to teach kids about situational awareness or how to dial 911, you have kind of that formula that you've baked in, but when we think about, the story or the why behind why we're teaching children this, what is your kind of recommendation or your approach when you're talking about the fire, when you're talking about the safety concern? Like, how do you approach that in a way that tries to remove the anxiety that a child might feel? And I think like this also, is an important question because of how anxious children are
Mhm.
nowadays. Like just statistically speaking, we do have children that are more anxious. They have access to more information, they know more. And so how do you approach like the why behind what kind of recommendations or activities that you do with kids?
Well, the first thing I would definitely say is don't shy away from it.
Hmm.
I think you absolutely have to call it out, and you have to tell them that this is something that can happen.
Yeah.
We hope it never happens. These are and then explaining why we do them. So, smoke detectors are a great example. So, we change the batteries every 6 months,
Yep.
and talking to your kids, hey guys, mom's changing or dad's changing the smoke detectors. Do you know
Yeah.
why we do this? Well, because they keep us safe, right? Well, why do they keep us safe? Because sometimes fires start in places that they shouldn't start. And we do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. But we're putting these smoke detectors in to make sure that if it does, they will tell us. So I think that's the
Mm,
first piece, explaining why we're doing things, but not
sure.
shying away from it. Giving kids just a little bit of information. They don't need to know all of it, but giving kids just a little bit of information tells them, I have a role and I'm in charge of my own safety.
Mhm.
And that goes tenfold a way, that will carry on beyond fire and natural disasters. That goes to their own personal safety just out in the world. And it helps give them, hey, this is something that's scary that I can't control, but this is what I can do. This is my role
Right.
in this.
Yeah.
And so it's important to share with kids, because the worst thing you can do is never address it with your child. And then they're faced with it, because the reality is that at some point they will be faced with some situation that we haven't adequately prepared them for.
Mhm.
And what
Right.
we want to do is we want to create and give them a skill set that's transferable, that's not scary, that tells them, I recognize the problem and I can do something about it. I can tell somebody. I can get help. I can do an action that will help. And I talk about the senses. So I use this. If you hear it, if you see it, if you smell it, if you feel it, use your own senses and tell somebody. tell a helper, and we talk about finding helpers. Who are the helpers in our community? Trusted people. And trusted people might look different for everyone, and that's okay. But talk about it with your family. And so, really, more than anything, I call it family. We're going to have a family circle, and everyone gets in a circle, and we all pick, whoever it is that night gets to pick something special, and they get to go first, and we get to talk about something, and we just have family time, and we talk about stuff. Hey, and you start with the basic stuff, like, how was your day? I always say, give me the funniest thing that happened to you today, and who did you make smile, and did anyone cry, and why? And it starts getting kids thinking about, oh, okay, well, let me think back to what my day was about. And then they know I'm going to ask them these things. So
Yeah.
then naturally they're looking for them. And in those times, we talk about the hard stuff. Hey guys, tonight we're just going to talk about different ways to get in and out of the house. The funny thing is when I wrote the book, and I sat down with my two older kids, they were scheming how to climb out of windows. And I was like, this is not the intent of the book.
You're like, wait, this may have backfired.
No, it's like, hold on, hold on. But what it did is it got them thinking, okay, well, if we're on a second story, how would we get out? And so then it prompted the conversation of, this is what we would do, and this is what you say. So I love that senses kind of component, because it
Yeah.
works for adults as well.
Yeah.
So it's shifting it from the scary, because listen, fear is paralyzing, and it shifts it from fear to actually then being part of having a role in that and being proactive in that process. It's really important for kids to feel that they are capable of handling different situations.
Yeah.
And we do that as parents, and
Yeah.
we can do that
Right.
in different ways without having to scare them.
Well, kids are people too, and I think it's just like that. If you're better prepared, if you've thought through what you're going to do, you're going to execute better, you're going to respond better. So it just makes sense that,
Yeah.
a better prepared child is going to be less likely to panic, be less likely to have anxiety about a thing, and be more likely to tell someone. So, it makes so much sense, and yet we do so little about it
Yeah.
as parents.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, I like the sentiment too, Soraya, about it's knowledge is power,
Yeah.
right? When you are feeling anxious about something, it's because you don't have all the information or you don't
Mhm.
have the right tools. And so really shifting that focus from, oh, hey, here are these scary things that could happen to you, and don't do this or avoid that or whatever, but it's the empowering of the child. And I will say, as a parent, I can't wait to explore this conversation with my own children, and I
Mhm.
have not done the best job, but I've done some things,
Yeah.
right? And I will say that during those moments where I have, had the hard conversation around, there are safety concerns and here's what we should do.
Mhm.
Like my daughter, the older one, she loves learning things.
Mhm.
And so she doesn't really look at it as a scary thing. She's like, "Oh, here's what my mom taught me, and let me go tell my friends about it too, or let me go share with my friends." And maybe that's a thing there too of, hey, my best friend Caitlin learned this from me or whatnot. But, I think just creating more knowledge for them to tap into is a great way to reduce the anxiety around that.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about kind of from your experience as an emergency manager, your experience as a parent, your experience more recently, which we'll talk about, just about general safety recommendations, or how what are some of the things that you tell your kids to do or tell other children to do, or anything from your book as well about just being prepared, whether it's things around the house, things from the community perspective. And, at the time of this recording, you very unfortunately have experienced this in real life within the last couple of weeks. You said it earlier on, it's, something that you don't think is going to happen to you. And very unfortunately, you and your family were evacuated from your home, which, had destruction to it from a house fire. And, to the degree that you would like to talk about it, we'd like to hear about it. What was your experience given your background? What was it like as a parent? Are there things that, given that you went through this, that you would share with other people? But, if you could talk a little bit about that, we'd appreciate it.
Unfortunately, I've come from a place where I've thought through this a lot, because just of the work that I do. And I've talked to my kids a lot about, if something would happen, if we couldn't get out this way, how else could we get out? So I would say it's every parent's nightmare. It's every mother's nightmare. And I'm going to try not to cry because it's been a lot. So at about 3:45 in the morning on the 22nd, I woke up to what sounded like a sledgehammer hitting concrete. And it was just like a one after the other after the other. And I jumped up and I woke up my fiance and I said, "What is that noise?" And he went running out and it sounded almost like gunfire as kind of I'm processing it all. Um, and I immediately ran through my kitchen's upstairs, my bedroom's in the back, down to the living room to the stairwell that leads downstairs. And I looked out the window to my neighbor's house. So for context, the homes where we are, we're at the beach. We're about 3 feet apart. We have a 3 foot setback. So, I mean, to the point where if both of us reached a hand out of a window, I could touch my neighbor. So we're all very close. And their garage door was open, and I saw sparks. And I heard the banging, and I saw it very faintly. It was hard because I had the screen down. I could see smoke, not a lot, but just a little. And I intuitively, just based on my background, my experience, I knew it was a fire, and the fire hadn't even started, and or at least had blown up to that point where it had become too much. So immediately I knew exactly what to do. I ran back, I grabbed my phone, I called 911. And when I called them, and I don't even remember doing it. I told them exactly where I was. I said, my neighbor's house is on fire. They live at this address. There are 3 people in the home that I knew of at the time. I said, they're elderly, they cannot get out. And as I'm talking to them, I'm running downstairs and I went to get my kids and wake them up. Well, that evening, I actually had more kids than I thought or knew of, normally do, because I had the neighbor's kids spending the night.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I turned the lights on and again, their bedroom's right next to this house. And I said, you guys, I said, Ricky's house is on fire. I said, I need you to put a jacket on, grab your shoes, and grab whatever is important that you can find right now and go next door to Carol and Bill's. And my neighbors live on the other side of us. And very calmly, they all got up. They all got their shoes, their jackets. And again, it's eye-opening when you see what kids take with them. My youngest grabbed her little stuffies that she's had since she was a baby. And she left. And so I knew I had a little time because my house wasn't on fire yet, and the fire had just started, and I could make that judgment. Now, I don't recommend anyone else making this same level of judgment because you just don't know, and the volatility of fires. You have 90 seconds to escape a house fire. 90 seconds once your house is on fire. And by the time that it reaches the smoke detectors, it's almost too late. People don't die from house fires from being burned. They die from smoke inhalation.
Right.
And so I knew I had to get the dog. So I ran back upstairs. I grabbed the dog. I went to the safe. I grabbed everything out of our safe. And as I was running downstairs, and I will tell you, I performed terribly. Like, just to be honest, like I train people to do this. And I think as I reflect why, I was so worried about people. I was worried about my neighbors not getting out. They were elderly. One was deaf. The other was bedbound. Their grandson lived with them, older. But I didn't hear anything coming from the house. And as I was running downstairs, oddly enough, my first inclination was to open my garage door, which is just strange. Like, but that's how we always go. So, caveat to that, teach your kids that the way that they go in and out of the house, take to different routes. It's a really good idea because you get so used to the process of I have to go out the same way I went in.
Yeah.
I just lived that. And we have talked about it, but I that was just what I did. I always went out my garage door. I opened the garage door and I actually ran next door to see if I could get my neighbors out. And I remember standing in between my house and their house, which again was right there. And everything in the garage was just melting off the ceiling. I mean, it was just so hot. And at that point, I grabbed a hose. I was trying to put, I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, trying to put the fire out, but I thought maybe if I could clear a path, I could
Right.
get into the house to help them. Um, at that point, the police department showed up and they're asking questions. Who's in the house? And this is something I think, we don't talk about when we talk about preparedness. Like, what are first responders going to be doing? And what they're going to be tackling first. But PD was first on scene. They likely will always be before fire because they can get there quicker. And they were asking me questions like, how do we get in their house? Who's in the house? Are they able to walk? Have you heard from them? Like, questions that I wouldn't, I mean, obviously I'm sharing as much as I can, but I really didn't know. And they ended up having to go through my backyard, tear through the fence, and get them out that way, because you couldn't go through the front of the house. What I will tell people, first of all, you never think it's going to happen, but my kids were calm. They were calm. They knew exactly what to do. And even after the fact, my oldest was like, Mom, I knew if I couldn't go out the front door, I would go out the back because we talked about it. So we've all we've had those conversations. My kids were calm. I was not. Shockingly, I mean, I was calm, but I was so worried about people that I ended up leaving my go bag. I ran out without shoes. I left my purse. I left my phone in the house. Because I realized I didn't have it. I had no idea where I put it in the commotion. Um, there's just, and that's part of it is I was trying to help the police department get those people out, get my people out, worried about the kids that I didn't even think about. We talk about go bags. We talk about having shoes. We talk about having all this extra stuff. And that's great if you remember to take it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't even know what happened to the bag. Well, sure enough, it was in my garage and I had dropped it on the way out. Few things. Always back your car in to your house, garage, whatever. My fiance was like, move your car. And thank God I did because it would have been destroyed. It's next to everything that ended up burning on this side of the house. But I got out and I literally drove straight across the street and parked it. Thank goodness I did because we had a car. In my car, I actually had a jacket and a pair of tennis shoes. And and a water bottle and some random stuff. And my kids are constantly leaving stuff in the car and it drives me crazy. But it was oddly, the weird part about it was it just felt normal, after this. And for a while it was all we had access to. And so that was one piece. The second is keep your important documents in a safety deposit box. Do not keep them in your house. You do not need to be worrying about getting that stuff. We talk about if you have time to get out of your home, what you should take. We always say 30 minutes, 5 minutes, no time. No, you have no time. If there is a house fire, you have no time. You do not need to be running to a safe to get stuff or get a go bag or anything like that. So put all that stuff in a safety deposit box. Actually, we found during the Palisades fires, the only thing that survived at banks were burned to the ground, were the vaults where all the safety deposit boxes were. That was all that survived. So get stuff out, keep important stuff out of safe so you're not thinking about, I've got to go get those types of things. Document everything in your house, you guys, like everything pre-fire, pre-disaster. Just walk around with your phone and just videotape it because you need that for your insurance. Then the last part to this was, and I think I mentioned it in the beginning, kids process things differently. And I remember my kids, at one point, my oldest was like, can you just stop talking about it? And for me, talking about it is my way of processing and healing from it. And I said, no, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about all of it. And she, that evening, my oldest, she's 15. She's at that balance between, am I adult, but am I still a child? Yeah. And she actually took a video. I had no phone. She took a video of when the fire first started before it truly it blew up to everything. And she wanted to watch. And I started thinking about it and I thought about my reaction. I wanted to watch. And it was her way of processing all of it. And she processed it in the moment. and then let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like my youngest is still kind of going through,
Yeah.
I miss my home. I
Yeah.
miss my,
Mhm.
these are like, it's a different perspective, and finding outlets for your kids to express themselves through, pictures, drawings, whatever's, I always love pictures because kids can share a lot through what's in their brains
Yeah.
just through a photo. But I also tell my kids to name the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of the times kids can't always decipher what they're feeling, right? And that's when you've got kids that are having outbreaks and emotional meltdowns, and they just don't know what to do with all. They don't know where to put it. And I have talked them through this to name the feeling. Can we name it? Whatever it might be. Let's name the feeling. Let's bring it up. If it's sadness, if it's anger, it might be all of it. And let's talk about it and let's feel it, and we talk about it, and we say how it's really sad, but we're safe, and we keep talking about it. But guess what, you knew what to do. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
that feel
Yeah.
good? Tell mom, I want to hear from you. What were you most worried about? And when you start talking with your kids, especially start talking about what to do in safety, listen more than you speak, because they often know way more than we think they
Mhm.
do. But sometimes something that's very simple that we might think is different, they see it differently. So hearing, what do you think we should do? What do you think are things that we can do here? Let's do them together. What would be something safe to put in our room that might help us in that? So that's after going through it and experiencing it, and it's just a surreal experience. You never ever think it's going to happen to you until it does. And I think the biggest thing I want to tell families and parents out there, you have 90 seconds to get out of your house.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a plan, you won't make it. That night, it could have been very tragic and we
Yeah.
could have lost everyone,
Yeah.
but we did. And we had a plan.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you sharing, and that experience sounds incredibly traumatic, and I'm sure will take some time for you and your family to work through. And I know you said that you didn't execute well, but the one thing that I heard was that the thing that's most important to you, your kids, were out of the house safely, calmly, easily, and they knew exactly what to do. And that is really amazing, and that's a testament to the time and the effort and the things that you taught them. And I think that's really incredible. So
It is.
we're really hoping that things go smoothly and that you guys can get back to normalcy as quickly as possible. I don't even know where to begin with our tangible takeaways because you have given us so many incredible things to chew on throughout this episode. So I'm gonna pick a couple, but there's 1,000.
Yeah.
So I think that anyone listening here can cherry pick whatever they'd like. I think one of the things that you said that really resonated was about making this fun for your
Yeah.
kids. There's really an opportunity here to make this educational, make it fun, especially if you have little ones. We both have 4-year-old sons, so I would kept thinking about this being the perfect age and also it being kind of hilarious for them to be learning some of this stuff right now.
Yeah.
So making it fun. The second thing is not to shy away from it. And I think that really resonated because, I think for me personally, coming up, and I mentioned this a couple of times because I think this is really the main takeaway that that's hitting hard for me is that I come from a family where we just didn't really talk about hard things,
Yeah.
And so for me, the concept of talking about the hard things, especially, and I actually also had a house fire as a kid. That is something that I experienced firsthand. I woke up and I couldn't see because the house was filled with black smoke in the middle of the night. We were several minutes away from my entire family not making it because of smoke inhalation. So, and we had never talked about we'd never talked about a
Yeah.
fire ever. Not once had we prepared for something like that. So what an opportunity, and the idea of not shying away from it. Big tangible takeaway there. And if none of those are good for you, then check out a kid's book about safety, and get all of
Yeah.
the goodies from
Yes.
directly from the book.
Yes, we will be purchasing the book, and we'll send you a picture, Soraya, of us teaching our kids amazing lessons. I mean, truly. Um, but that is a wrap on this episode of Discover Resilience, the podcast. Amazing, story and background, Soraya. We are wishing you and your family all of the best, and appreciate you sharing all of your recommendations and guidance, on how to stay safe and empower children, and really give them the language and the confidence to be prepared. So really appreciate you being on the podcast today. Catch more episodes wherever you stream your podcasts, and to learn more on the full picture on how to stay ahead, head to everbridge.com. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, stay resilient.
Thanks, guys.